Plant a tomato sideways. Lay cardboard straight over grass. Bury a gallon jug beside a squash plant. Put bread dough in a slug trap. They look wrong, but each solves a real garden problem for almost nothing. Here are 13 cheap ideas worth trying. Start with the coffee grounds you probably threw away this morning. Used coffee grounds are worth keeping. Just don't build a thick, wet ring of them around every plant. Coffee grounds are fine textured, so a heavy layer can pack together and stay soggy. They work much better mixed into a compost pile with things that provide more structure: dry leaves, shredded cardboard, grass clippings, old plant material. Oregon State recommends keeping coffee grounds below about 20% of the total compost pile. That's plenty. A simple routine is to dump the filter into the compost, toss a handful of dry leaves over it, and walk away. And if you've heard that used coffee grounds will automatically make your soil acidic enough for blueberries, don't count on it. Used grounds aren't a reliable substitute for actually checking the soil pH. You're still keeping something useful out of the trash. You're just letting the compost pile finish the job before your vegetables have to deal with it. One coffee filter at a time doesn't look like much. By the end of a season, it adds up to a surprising amount of organic material that never had to leave the yard. This is one of those methods that looks bad on planting day and completely normal a week later. If a tomato transplant has grown tall and leggy indoors, don't dig a ridiculously deep hole just to hide the stem. Dig a shallow trench. Remove the lowest leaves, lay most of the stem along the trench, cover it with soil, and leave the top few sets of leaves above ground. The plant will turn upward toward the light. Meanwhile, the buried section of tomato stem can produce additional roots. That long, awkward transplant suddenly has more stem underground capable of becoming part of the root system. There's another advantage in spring. A shallow trench keeps more of the plant in the warmer upper soil instead of dropping the original root ball deep into colder ground. Just mark where the buried stem runs. Otherwise, you may come back with a stake 2 weeks later and drive it straight through the section you carefully buried. For a short, sturdy transplant, plant normally. This trick earns its keep when the seedling has stretched out and looks like it's trying to escape the pot. Starting a new bed doesn't always require removing the grass first. Flatten plain corrugated cardboard boxes, pull off the tape and staples, and lay the cardboard directly over the lawn. Overlap the sheets generously, then soak everything. The cardboard needs to settle against the grass, not sit dry and stiff on top of it. Once it's wet, cover it with compost, shredded leaves, straw, wood chips, or whatever organic mulch makes sense for the bed you're building. Without light, the grass underneath weakens. The cardboard softens. Soil organisms begin working through the layers. The biggest mistake is getting stingy with the overlap. Leave a narrow strip uncovered, and grass will find it. Give yourself several inches at every seam, especially around the outside edge. Newspaper can do the same job in smaller spaces, but cardboard is easier when you're converting a bigger patch. Try one 4x8-foot section before covering half the yard. If it works well in your soil and climate, you can always make the next bed bigger. And if delivery boxes keep piling up in the garage, at least now they have somewhere useful to go. A clean milk jug can become a very simple underground watering reservoir. Make a few small holes low on the sides of the jug. Bury most of it beside a tomato, squash, pepper, or another large plant, leaving the neck above the soil. Fill it with water. Instead of spreading that gallon across the surface, the water slowly leaks out underground close to the root zone. But test the jug before you bury it. Fill it and watch. If it's empty 10 minutes later, your holes are too big. If the water level hasn't moved by the next morning, make them slightly larger. You're looking for a slow release. Keep the opening capped between refills or cover it with fine mesh. An open container of standing water can give mosquitoes exactly what they need. This setup makes the most sense beside individual plants rather than an entire bed. And it doesn't mean you should automatically refill it every day. Check the soil first, especially after rain. The jug isn't smart, you still have to be. But for a thirsty summer plant, getting water below the hot surface can make each refill more useful. Grab a small cup, a spoonful of garden soil, and some ordinary white vinegar. Pour the vinegar onto the soil. If you get a strong fizz, you're watching acid react with free lime, or calcium carbonate, in the soil. That reaction is especially useful to recognize in parts of the western United States where lime-rich alkaline soils are common. Why does it matter? Because if your soil contains a lot of free lime, lowering the pH can be much harder than simply sprinkling an acidic amendment around a plant. You can spend a lot of money trying to make that soil behave like blueberry ground when the carbonate underneath keeps pushing back. This isn't an exact pH test. A soil lab can give you the actual number and tell you much more about nutrients. The vinegar test answers one quick question: is there enough free lime here to react strongly? If the cup suddenly starts bubbling like a science fair volcano, that's useful information before you buy another bag of amendment. 30 seconds, 1 spoonful of soil, and you know a little more about what you're actually gardening in. Beer traps for slugs have been around forever. The slugs don't care about the beer. They're interested in fermentation. Oregon State researchers tested different attractants and found fermented bread dough could be extremely attractive to slugs and snails. So mix flour, water, and a little yeast into a loose dough or slurry and put some in a trap close to the plants being chewed. Location matters. If your lettuce is disappearing beside a damp stone border, put the trap there. Don't set one 50 feet away next to the garage and wonder why nothing happens. Then check it the next morning. If you find slugs in the trap, slime trails on the soil, and fresh holes in the lettuce, the diagnosis is pretty clear. If the trap stays empty, you may be blaming the wrong pest. That's what makes this more useful than simply spraying something and hoping. You get pest control and a crude diagnostic at the same time, and you get to keep the beer. The aspirin trick sounds exactly like the kind of gardening advice that gets passed around without anybody checking it. But this one has an interesting detail. A regular 325 milligram aspirin tablet, dissolved in 1 gallon of water, lands close to concentrations of acetyl salicylic acid that researchers have tested on tomato and bean plants. In those studies, plants exposed to low concentrations showed better tolerance to stresses, including heat, chilling, and drought. That doesn't mean every tomato needs aspirin on a schedule. It does make this an easy side-by-side experiment. Dissolve 1 uncoated 325 milligram tablet thoroughly in a gallon of water. Use it once on a few similar young plants around a stressful period, such as hardening off or transplanting. Leave another few untreated. Same variety, same soil, same weather. Then watch what happens over the following days. If the treated plants handle the transition better, you've got a reason to test it again. If they look exactly the same, you've lost 1 aspirin tablet. Don't add 3 tablets because 3 sounds stronger. With plant treatments, concentration is part of the experiment. Cheap does not mean unlimited. Every fall, people bag up leaves, haul them away, and then buy mulch and compost ingredients later. Try running the mower over dry leaves first. Shredding makes them easier to manage. Smaller pieces settle around plants, mix into compost better, and are less likely to form one thick wet mat. On a lawn, a moderate layer of shredded leaves can disappear between the grass blades instead of being hauled to the curb. If there are too many, collect the excess. Put some around garden beds. Keep some beside the compost pile as dry brown material. Leave some plant debris in the quieter corners of the yard where insects can overwinter. You don't need to turn the whole property into a leaf sanctuary, and you don't need to scrub every square foot clean. The mower gives you a middle option. A pile that looked like yard waste 10 minutes ago becomes mulch, compost carbon, and material you would otherwise have to replace with something from a bag. Marigolds are probably the most overworked flowers in companion planting charts. People put 3 of them beside a tomato and expect protection from everything with 6 legs. There's one garden problem where marigolds are much more interesting: root knot nematodes. These microscopic pests attack plant roots and leave swollen knots behind. A badly affected plant can stay weak even when watering and fertility look fine. If you suspect them, pull up one struggling plant and look at the roots. If you actually have root knot nematodes, certain marigolds can be used as a cover crop to help suppress their populations. That means planting them densely enough to occupy the affected area, not tucking one decorative flower into the corner. Give the marigolds a real turn in the rotation. Then follow with your vegetable crop. This isn't a quick rescue for the tomato that's already sick. It's a way to use one planting season to change what the next crop encounters underground. And that's far more useful than treating marigolds as a magical border around everything else. Nasturtiums earn their space around squash, pumpkins, broccoli, and cabbage for more than their flowers. Trials have found lower pressure or less crop damage from pests, including squash bugs, cucumber beetles, cabbage loopers, and imported cabbage worms, when nasturtiums were part of the planting. Give them enough room to matter. Put them close to the crops you're trying to protect, or let them trail along the edge of a raised bed where they won't crowd the center. Then watch what happens. Are the squash leaves cleaner? Are caterpillars showing up more heavily on one part of the planting? Is damage lower than in a similar bed without nasturtiums? That's a better way to use companion planting than blindly following a chart that says 2 plants are friends. Nasturtium leaves and flowers are edible too. So even in a season when pest pressure stays light, the space isn't wasted. You end up with a useful border instead of a decorative plant that was only there because somebody on the internet told you tomatoes needed a buddy. Pruning at the wrong time can remove an entire year's flowers without doing any real harm to the shrub. That's what makes the mistake so confusing. The lilac looks healthy. It grows. It just doesn't bloom. Lilacs, forsythia, and many other spring-flowering shrubs produce their flower buds on growth formed during the previous season. If you prune them hard before spring bloom, some of the branches you're cutting off already contain the flowers you've been waiting for. Let them flower first. Once the blooms fade, remove weak, crowded, crossing, or badly placed stems. The shrub then has the rest of the growing season to make new growth and set up next year's display. Many summer flowering shrubs work differently because they bloom on new growth. So before grabbing the pruners, figure out when the shrub flowers. Spring bloomer? Enjoy the flowers first, then cut. It costs nothing, takes no extra work, and can be the difference between a lilac covered in blooms and a very healthy green bush. A 6-inch wooden frame is technically a raised bed. That doesn't mean it's enough bed for everything you want to grow. The surface underneath matters. If the bed sits over decent native soil, roots can often continue below the frame. If it sits on concrete, paving, or another hard surface, the box is all the root space those plants get. For leafy greens and other relatively shallow-rooted vegetables, around 8 inches can work. Large fruiting plants, such as tomatoes, peppers, and squash, are better served by considerably more depth, often 12 inches or more, with deeper beds useful when the plants have nowhere else for their roots to go. More soil also holds more water. That becomes obvious in July, when a shallow box over hot pavement dries out faster than you expected. So don't choose the lumber first. Choose the crops. If you're building a salad bed, keep it shallow and save the soil. If you want full-size tomatoes on a patio, give their roots somewhere to live before buying 6 plants and squeezing them into a box built for lettuce. The cheapest raised bed is the one you don't have to rebuild. Succession planting gets much easier once you stop waiting for empty soil. If spring lettuce is starting to bolt, start the beans now. If radishes are nearly ready, decide what replaces them before you pull the row. When the first crop comes out, the next one should be close behind it. Late in summer, use the same idea with fall crops. Find your average first frost date. Look at the days to maturity on the seed packet and count backward. Quick crops such as radishes, lettuce, arugula, mustard greens, and spinach can use weeks that otherwise disappear between the summer harvest and cold weather. You can also sow fast vegetables in smaller batches instead of planting every seed on one Saturday and harvesting everything on another Saturday 6 weeks later. For example, plant a short row of radishes this week and another short row 10 days later. Now the harvest arrives in waves instead of one pile. When a crop finishes, pull it, refresh the surface with compost if needed, and plant again that day. Same bed, same soil, another harvest window. Don't try all 13 this weekend. Pick the problem that's already annoying you. If weeds are taking over, soak some cardboard. If the tomato transplant is falling across the windowsill, dig the trench. If lettuce is disappearing overnight, mix the dough tonight and check the trap tomorrow. If a spring crop is nearly finished, start its replacement now. Most of these ideas cost almost nothing. You just have to give something ordinary a better job.